In studio with us today is Phil Mendelson. He is chair of the DC City Council. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You should know I have not seen Tom Sherwood for 2 weeks. I last left him bawling like a baby at Fatty's Tattoo Parlor over in Northeast Washington.
Yeah.
Why was he crying, you may ask?
No, I didn't ask.
He got a tattoo of the DC flag on his shoulder.
Excellent.
You know, as a one sportscaster used to say, let's go to the videotape.
And see who was bawling.
I sat there, engaged people in lively conversation and banter. You sat there stone-like, afraid that if you release that calm demeanor you have, that you might cry. And he got the teeny tiniest tattoo.
Well, on to the show we have to do here today. If you have any questions or calls for the chairman of the council, you can call us at 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org. Senator Rand Paul tried to introduce an amendment into the Senate's vote to repeal Obamacare that said that residents and non-residents of the District of Columbia should be able to carry concealed weapons wherever they go, except in sensitive areas of federal property. For some reason or the other, Chairman Mendelson, you didn't like that.
Correct. I think it was pretty outrageous that he did that. First of all, the way he tried to do it, which was an amendment to a non-germane amendment. But, you know, we've been through this before, and particularly now, given the recent tragedies, it's almost as if these mass shootings are occurring weekly now. And the last thing we need is more guns. The answer to gun violence is not more guns.
I've changed my position on banning guns, actually. I think we should allow everyone to have a gun if they allow us to carry them into the Congress, into the White House Visitor Center, and to the FBI. Let's just all carry guns if this is where we want. I mean, first of all, the senator ought to respect the people of the city and come here and talk about what he'd like to do so we could have a full conversation with him. And I still want to open my gun shop up on Capitol Hill and give out free toy guns to all the little children who pass by on the way to the Congress.
Well, I appreciate the sarcasm. I think that the Wild West is not the solution.
No,
I think the Wild West is not the solution. But you make a point. The point is that there's a hypocrisy at work here, which is, you know, we'll all be safer if everybody has guns. Oh, but not in the halls of Congress, for example.
If the NRA would say guns everywhere, then we could have that discussion. The discussion is guns nowhere or guns everywhere.
For the first time since the 1950s, Washington, D.C. can no longer be referred to as chocolate cities because African Americans no longer make up 50% of the population, according to data released yesterday by the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. 49.6% of D.C.'s population identified as Black or African American, 40.2% white, and 9.9% Hispanic or Latino. The white population in the city is growing faster than the African American population, even as the population of the city overall has been growing over the past decade.
These are nice numbers, but Mr. Chairman, I thought there had been at least a preliminary Census Bureau report that had the African American population drop below 50% before a couple of years ago. Maybe this is some more formal tallying of the numbers, but I didn't think this was brand new news. You know, it used to be African Americans made up nearly 70% of the city. It's been a precipitous drop there. Mr. Chairman, what do the numbers tell you?
Well, I would agree with you that it's not a complete surprise. We've seen this trend over the over the last couple of decades. I think a piece of this, an important piece of this, is the affordability problem that we have in the city. It's expensive to live here, and lower income people are finding that if they have to move, they can't move within the city. I don't want to say that there isn't any affordable housing. There actually is, but there isn't enough of it. And I think this is a reflection of that problem.
I was out just yesterday at the new Lowe's that's opened at South Dakota, right there where the Costco is, and there's some nice townhomes. And I was going over with my cameraman to take a picture of them for my story, and the sign said, "New townhomes, Ridge." What I've forgotten exactly what Ridge was. From the 600s,
yeah,
the starting price is $600,000 for
go over to
townhome.
Bloomingdale, North
$1 million
Capitol.
houses.
Yes, $1 million houses.
And housing. When Jack Evans was here, he says the city government has enough money and enough wherewithal to do something more aggressive. The mayor says she's going to spend $100 million a year on affordable housing or some type of housing. What do you think needs to be done for housing?
I think there are a number of strategies. I think the most effective strategy, not to the exclusion of others, is putting more dollars into the Housing Production Trust Fund. Now, putting $100 million in, somebody says we can do more than that. $100 million is pretty hefty.
It'd be hard to spend.
I don't think that the fund is spending the money as
Right.
effectively or efficiently as it could be. And what do I mean by that? You know, banks don't sit on thousands of dollars, millions of dollars year after year after year. They move that money very quickly. The Housing Production Trust Fund will make a commitment to you, let's say, for $20 million for your project, that you're not going to actually draw the money until 2-3 years from now. So that money's just sitting there, not being used for other projects. And in that sense, we could be more efficient. I think we could need to look at how to run that fund more like a bank. I think that is the most effective strategy, that is the Housing Production Trust Fund, because there we can actually leverage the private sector to maintain or increase the stock of affordable housing. But there are other strategies. Our real property tax rate is the lowest in the region. We ought to look at whether there's other ways that we can reduce that burden on low-income residents.
Raise it for others?
No, I'm not.
You're not suggesting raising it?
No, absolutely not suggesting raising it. But, for example, we've expanded the threshold for the senior citizen property tax credit so that, with inflation, that the eligibility ceiling, we increased it. We have what's called a Schedule H circuit breaker on the income tax, which is, again, it's actually a credit on your income tax for the portion of your rent or real property tax that goes to real property tax.
In case you're just joining us, our guest is Phil Mendelson. He is chair of the D.C. City Council. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. If you have questions for the council chair, you can call 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, join the conversation, watch the live video stream, watch Tom Sherwood roll up his sleeves and show you his D.C. flag tattoo, or you can simply send us a tweet at Kojo Show.
We have to have a moratorium at some point and not mention the word tattoo.
That's it. That was the moratorium. I don't want to hear that word
for the next 46 minutes.
Mayor Bowser has launched an ambitious plan to end chronic homelessness in the district. Since we're talking about housing, earlier this month, the D.C. Council voted to close the city's family homeless shelter at D.C. General. The idea is to replace it with smaller shelters around the city, but you have expressed reservations about that plan and about what's next. What's next? Why?
Well, there are a couple of things that you said that aren't quite accurate.
You do that every time you come on this broadcast.
Vote to close.
Whenever he raises his index finger and his thumb and puts them together and starts waving it at
Maybe
you,
I'll talk
you
over
have
you
made
guys.
some
away at my
grammatical
Since
mistake.
nobody's listening to anybody here. We didn't actually vote to close DC General, although the council has said over and over again that we want to see DC General closed as a shelter for families. What we voted on was the mayor's proposal that would facilitate the construction of replacement shelters, as you mentioned, Kojo. I have not, I may have expressed some criticism.
Reservations.
I think that's overstating it a bit. We had a hearing on the legislation, but what we moved was essentially what the mayor proposed. There was a lot of controversy over whether the replacement shelters had to be essentially apartment style, that is, that you would have a bedroom and private bathroom. And in the end, my recommendation to the council was almost identical to the mayor's. So yes, if I raised questions, if I challenged what the executive was proposing, that's correct. But what I ultimately recommended was very I would say was consistent with the mayor's recommendation.
The politics is you've allowed you've said the mayor can close the DC General if in fact other things are done. But what about this idea that there will be shelters in every ward, all 8 wards, that the Ward 5 and other wards, Ward 7, won't bear the burden of homeless shelters? And I keep thinking, I'm trying to picture where in Ward 2 there might be some shelters, and in Ward 3 particularly. Do you agree with the political idea that shelters should be dispersed throughout the region of the city of Washington?
I'm supportive of that proposal. I'm supportive of it for a couple of reasons.
Can you name a site where it would be in Ward 3?
I don't know the sites that the mayor is looking at, But for one thing, an important part of the strategy is having smaller shelters. And surely there are 50 homeless individuals in Ward 3, as there are at least 50 homeless individuals in every ward.
I don't
It's
think they
not that
identify
there
themselves
isn't.
by ward, though, but they're all over the city and they
Correct.
congregate places where they think they can survive.
Correct. And now you see concentration, let's say downtown around the public library. Well, but that's because at least one of the overnight shelters, in the morning, everybody's bused to Martin Luther King and dropped off there.
I don't understand why we have a policy where the families aren't, of course, made to go out into the street. But why do we make what is the philosophical basis for saying, all right, homeless people, get out of this warm shelter, go out into the cold street, go out into the burning
I'm not going
hot
to defend it. I'm not going to defend that.
Why does allow them to stay there while you have services for them?
Well, and it makes it difficult for the individuals who are looking for work or who have work to actually maintain that work because, they're busy having to get out of the shelter by, I think it's 7 a.m, and then they have to get first in line or else there'll be no beds left in the evening. And a lot of this doesn't make sense. One of the things that Laura Zeilinger, who's the director of Department of Human Services, is focusing on is what she calls exits from shelter. All the attention has been on all these people coming into the shelter and whether we have enough capacity, but we really need to focus on getting these people placed out of shelter.
Right, that's the New York motto. You put them in housing first and then wrap the services around them.
Yes.
But you have to have the available housing.
Yes, and so that gets us back to the mayor's proposal, which is to build roughly 250 units for families. At that point, we no longer need DC General because that's roughly 250, might be a little more than that. And for them to be smaller shelters, DC General is just one big shelter with over 250 units, and the size of that makes it difficult.
I await the politics of when the mayor decides where these shelters are going to go in Ward 4 and Ward 3 and parts of Ward 5.
We'll be discussing it right here.
But the impact will be less if it's a smaller shelter. And as I said, there are homeless individuals
in
all
the grand
over
scheme,
city.
yes, it will be less, but for the people who live in the neighborhoods, it will be a sudden intrusion.
On to the Exelon-Pepco deal. The DC's DC's Public Service Commission, which had rejected the merger, is revisiting the issue in hearings this week. We heard on this broadcast from an Exelon executive earlier this week. Where do you come down on this issue? What's at stake here?
Well, I have stayed out of this public debate.
We're trying to bring you in.
You are trying.
I think did you have don't you own Pepco stock or something?
Yes. Years ago, I invested in our local utility, and so I've generally stayed out of this discussion.
Because you have an investment in Pepco stock?
Correct.
Would you be willing to sell your Pepco stock?
Have you disclosed
so
how
that you
much
can
it
participate
I've
in the
absolutely
discussion?
disclosed it.
Are you wealthy from it, or are you just
exceedingly? I think it's.
Well, it is. Let me just say the hearings,
shares.
the Public Service Commission is holding hearings. Betty Ann Kane had been the chairman, former council member, chairman of the Public Service Commission, had read a very strong statement when the commission rejected this merger. And there's been some glittering objects put on the Christmas tree by the mayor and others to make it look more palatable. But it's very interesting to me to see if, in fact, the Public Service Commission will go along with a compromise proposal. But you can't even comment on the compromise?
I choose not to. I just didn't.
What you can comment on is that the council voted 10-3 this week to approve the
People's Council,
Sandra Matavus-Fry as the head of the Office of People's Council. She reversed her position on the aforementioned Pepco Exelon deal after the mayor had entered into negotiations and came up with a few changes in that deal. There is some maybe mild controversy associated with the council's decision to approve Matavus-Fry in the middle of all of this going on. Why do you not put it off?
Well, the reason why I didn't put it off was because nominations by the mayor are time limited. And in this, they're time limited in a couple of ways. One is, at some point, this would have been deemed disapproved. The council has to act. Or if I remember correctly, it's deemed disapproved. Some are deemed approved, but I think this one not. But also, her position Her term was up in June, and six individuals can hold over for 6 months, but not longer. We saw years ago when Marion Barry was mayor that there were people who were holding over these appointments for years. And
But-
so the council ultimately legislated that one can't hold over more than 6 months. So that was the reason for acting on it.
What was the vote again?
10-3.
10-3.
So you
I was
voted. How did you vote on who the People's Council would be? But you can't comment on Pepco itself.
Because there's no direct relationship.
Well, she was against the Pepco
Well, that may
merger, and
be,
then
but-
and then she was for it, and then got reappointed to renominated. What, a couple of weeks after?
Well, I was struck in the debate. The three who were very vocal in their opposition to her reappointment praised her as people's counsel, and I pointed that out. There wasn't one person who said she'd been a lousy people's counsel, and everybody said, in fact, that she'd been good. But the three said that we're going to judge her based on this one case. And I think that's a little bit like I'm going to say punishing somebody for a position they take when these people are appointed to positions to be independent.
So how did you vote? How did you cast a vote? Because it's part and parcel of the utility regulation that, I mean, you don't own stock in her. Obviously.
There's not a direct relationship. That's why.
Put on your headphones, gentlemen, because there are individuals who want to discuss housing. Here first is Johnson in Washington, D.C. Johnson, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. We get a different brand of discussion about affordability of housing on a continuing basis. Just recently, our beloved mayor has indicated regarding the wharf on the Rock Newman show that there would be less than market rate prices for some residences down there. Now, if they're selling residences down there for $5 million, I guess this would mean that maybe for $4,500,000 would be the less than market rate. I don't think that's too persuasive for a lot of people in DC. Just as unpersuasive as the comparison of affordability for housing to Fairfax County and Montgomery County, two of the richest counties in America. And
what would you like to see the definition of affordability in housing actually say?
Actually, to state affordability, let's say for the Shaw neighborhood, maybe 7 or 10 years ago, where a family of 4 might be making $45,000 a year, period.
That's what you think the standard should be right now?
I think that it should.
Allow me to have Chairman Mendelson respond.
Let me break in here. The caller makes a good point. I can't speak to the wharf and what the rents are there or the prices. What we have done is we've looked at what's called area median income. That is a figure that's calculated independently. And then in terms of affordability requirements, where the government is able to require affordability, we do it as a percentage of the area median income, or AMI. And we have several levels in the law. And we require that those different levels, that there be percentages for each. The upper levels, which is like 80% of AMI, tends to be what we would call working class citizens, like let's say teachers or police. But then we have the lowest level is something like 30% of AMI. So the projects that will go through the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, they do have requirements for so many units will be 80%, so many will be 50%, so many units will be 30% AMI. And in that way, it's not 80% or 50% of the market rate, whatever the wharf thinks it can charge. It would be of that area median income on an individual basis or a family basis.
Thank you for your call, Johnson.
I got an email or a text from Bill Rice, noted busybody in city politics, and he says he recalls when Sharon Pratt Kelly tried to put a homeless shelter at the Guy Mason Rec Center on Wisconsin Avenue.
Yes.
Wasn't very popular.
Correct. It was an overnight shelter. It was replacing rec services, and it was so overnight meaning out at 7 in the morning, and it was going to be, as I recall, hundreds of individuals.
You were an A&C commissioner back then,
Correct.
weren't you? I remember.
Correct.
Very
He
active.
has the
Have
institution.
we mentioned family leave yet?
We're about to, but
One
first
of the
allow me to
lessons
get
of-
one more call in from Susan in Southwest Washington. Susan, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I did want to say that the Wharf apartments start at $400,000. I was unaware of any $4 or $5 million apartments there, but I happened to go the day that the sale of the Wharf apartment started, and they sold out in hours.
25 of them.
Yeah, and the people, I don't know where the people who purchased them came from, but I did want to just sort of correct that impression.
Well,
But what I really wanted to say was about the homeless situation. There was an ice storm. It was in March. I was at Sibley Hospital, and there were a lot of homeless people there. We have homeless people, and that's Ward 2, I believe. We have homeless people throughout the city, and I think that smaller homeless shelters would be helpful, and I find it hard to believe that people are in denial about the fact that our hospitals, our bridges, anywhere these people can find shelter is being used. And the the head of homelessness for Chicago, the city of Chicago, goes out and he has his staff going into abandoned buildings, empty houses, all over the city, trying to find homeless people and get them out of the cold.
And you're suggesting that
our nation's capital should do no less.
The city does this. Let me be clear about that, because the homeless people and the people who work for human services do this. They are and the contract people who we hire are constantly out on the streets trying to get people to come off the streets. You legally cannot make them unless they are a danger to themselves.
In October, the DC Council introduced the most generous paid leave in the country, 16 weeks, but it's gotten a great deal of pushback over who will pay for it. What are the issues? Where does the legislation now stand?
We've had the first of several hearings. That was this week. The issues at this point are pretty clear. They have to do with the fact that the bill is introduced would provide up to 16 weeks, that's 4 months of paid leave, and the individuals that would be eligible for this, or the circumstances rather that would be qualifying for this, are broader than what we see in other states. It's not to say that the proposal is a bad idea. What I tried to emphasize at the hearing is that there's a cost, and we have to be mindful of how that cost is being paid and whether that the amount of the cost is reasonable. As introduced, the bill says that employers will pay 1% of payroll to a fund, sort of like the unemployment fund that the government administers and pays out when somebody wants, qualifies for this paid leave. A good example would be a pregnancy and the delivery of a child, and the mother should have time to bond with the child. And I think the
father too.
The testimony there was very strong, but is 1% of payroll enough to pay for all of these different circumstances? And if it's not, is a higher figure reasonable? There was one witness who testified, who suggested that he thinks somewhere around 5% of, 0.5% of payroll would be a figure that would not actually cause businesses to relocate out of the city. We don't want to make it so expensive that we lose jobs.
There's a variety of things in terms of, people, the business people, of course, they cite the rising minimum wage, the possibility that the city could vote in a $15 minimum wage. There's a proposal to make employers be more responsible to part-time workers, because there are so many part-time workers now. But it just seems to me that this family leave measure, it sounds like a great idea. One council member said, if I could, I'd give 32 weeks, but the cost of this is going to be something. David Grosso, one of the principal sponsors, Lissa Silverman is the other. He told me this week that, maybe 16 weeks wouldn't work, 12, 10, 8 might work, like they're now given to workers. Alyssa Silverman is saying, no, this can work at 16 weeks. She's very strong that this can, in fact, work. Do you anticipate you'll be able to work this out between now and February? I mean, you're basically for some kind of family leave act. It's just the details. Are you, because the business, some of them will say we should not have this at all. It should not be mandated by the government.
I believe a family leave act will pass the council.
Some sort.
Yes, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to put a deadline for that. Because you suggested February. I don't know. I've tried to make it clear that we're not going to rush this through. So in part because I don't want folks just digging in and just opposing this because they see this being rushed through. Yeah, so I'm focused on the details. You know, if it's 0.5% of payroll to pay for 16 weeks, maybe that's not such a bad thing. There's no question, but that like a mother with a newborn should have time to.
What about
to
a
bond
father?
with it. There was testimony.
You said mother twice. That's how
I
I keep
did
saying
say
father.
mother twice.
He chooses his words carefully, though.
Yes, he
Here's the
does.
explanation.
Sometimes I do.
Well,
I thought you were going to explain why you didn't include father in your early comments.
Well, the
You were saying
testimony
someone
was
testified.
about not just a parent bonding, but also breastfeeding, and you want to have a connection. That the mother wants to have a connection with the child in order for that to happen successfully. That the amount of time that takes, that's just kind of different than with
Kaya
fathers.
Henderson, the chancellor of the school system, told me this week that she thought the 16-week provision would devastate her ability to keep teachers in the classroom.
Well, 16 weeks is 4 months. Where I think that it can be illustrated rather graphically is if you have a small business, and the bill does not exempt small businesses of 4 people, and one of them takes 4 months off, that's a quarter of your workforce that's not there.
And the federal workers would be treated here differently than maybe elsewhere. I'm not sure how that would work either.
Well, we'd
That's
like to
another
give you an
issue.
update on another issue, but let's start with a backdate because there are those of you who may remember that when Mayor Muriel Bowser appeared on this broadcast, she said, well, about the streetcar, this.
We will get the streetcar running on H Street.
Do you have any idea when?
Yes,
Would you care to share that with us?
No.
soon.
You have a date in mind?
Will you ride it in your first term?
I will ride it in the first year.
And that's what becomes significant because this is the first year and it's rapidly coming to an
So
end.
you never
So
self-impose a deadline.
joining us in studio is Martin DeCaro. He is WAMU's traffic and transportation reporter. Martin DeCaro, thank you for joining us. What is the update on the H Street streetcar?
Well, just look at the calendar. There are 27 days left in the year.
Yes.
The streetcar program has to undergo what's called a pre-revenue operations phase, a final test phase that takes 21 days. It is all but guaranteed streetcar passenger service will not start in this calendar year. And a statement from the mayor's office in so many words confirms that. Michael Zinn, the mayor's spokesperson, the mayor is committed to opening streetcar as soon as it is safe to do so. The next step in the process is pre-revenue operations, which we expect to start in the coming weeks. And from people within the project I've spoken to have said that, yes, another calendar year will come and go, and people will not be boarding the streetcar in 2015. The issue remains the safety certification process with oversight officials who are housed within the DC Fire Department have yet to sign off on this final test phase and the overall safety documentation for the 2.4 mile line. So,
Council Chairman Mendelson, do you have any confidence that we will ever be able to ride this streetcar?
Yes, I think that we will be able to ride the streetcar on H Street. I think it's very unfortunate the way that project has rolled out, and it's not Mayor Bowser's fault. For many years, that project proceeded with, what do I want to say, build first and plan afterwards. And we're seeing the consequences of that now. But I do
Shoot
think-
first and aim later.
Shoot, yes.
Right.
So what would be frustrating to the public on this count is when Mayor Bowser took over and put a new appointee at the head of DDOT, Leif Dormsjo, they hit the reset button on the project. They brought in the outside experts from APTA. They did a top to bottom review of the project. They've rebuilt the platforms. They've fixed the streetcars. They've retrained all the personnel. Yet this safety certification process continues to drag on, and it is open-ended. That's what is mostly frustrating for people. There is no date as to when it will open. There's no date as to when pre-revenue operations can begin, which take 21 days.
Well, I will continue to enjoy the trial runs that seem to occur about 20 times a day.
You
on
mean
H Street
enjoy
Northeast.
watching them because nobody can ride.
I
the
enjoy
trial run.
watching the trial runs in DC. We only have about a minute left, and I'm sure Tom Sherwood has a pressing issue for you
Well,
to deal with. before
oddly
you-
enough, he's answered all the questions
Martin
with
McCarroll, thank
unique
you so much for
ability
joining us.
to dice and slice answers. I congratulate you. You know, when he first got
I'm
into
shocked.
at large
Wow,
council
I'm
member,
shocked.
he was unable to put together a soundbite. It took him forever, but now he's just like an expert at it.
Well, he comes here and picks away at everything.
You know, you're
that
the
I
one who
say.
told
He's
me in
gotta
my
stop
first
doing that.
campaign, which I didn't win, that my slogan should be all brains and no hair.
Something like that.
He is
we're
Phil
questioning
Mendelson,
about the
the
first
chair
part of
of the DC City Council. Chairman Mendelson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Coach.
Don
Thank you,
Sherwood, he's
Tom.
our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. Joining us now by phone. He is on his way here, but got backed up in traffic, is Corey Stewart. He is the chairman of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Chairman Stewart, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Coach Joe. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
Where are you in traffic?
Well, we were on 95, but we're in D.C. now. We're getting pretty close.
Well, I was in your county this, past couple of days ago, and I just thank the Lord I was not driving.
Well, we thank you for permitting Tom Sherwood to enter the county. Who also entered the county is Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. He held a rally on Wednesday in Manassas. It's my understanding that you and he met privately beforehand. Is this an indication that you are likely to be endorsing Donald Trump for president?
Well, I'm certainly thinking about that. I've got, I have a couple of candidates for president that I'm interested in supporting, and he is one of them. So
who's on your short list? Because I know you don't have a long list.
Well, I think Cruz is on that list, and Trump. Some of the other candidates, either for ideological reasons I cannot support, and there are a couple that frankly are just fading real quick and just don't have much of a chance of making it through the process.
A lot of people thought Jeb Bush would be somebody who would appeal to the Virginians in a presidential race, in which Virginia could play an important role in the coming presidential campaign. But Jeb Bush there's barely a ticker on him in the national polls and even state polling.
Yeah, I think that's right. He had a so-called rally, and I say so-called because there were 59 people in attendance. And he's obviously he's on a life support at this point.
You and candidate Trump, I assume, discussed the issue of immigration. You have praised him for bringing the issue up in the campaign. But his views on it, of course, are fairly controversial, one of them being that he believes that undocumented, what he calls illegal immigrants, should be rounded up and deported. Do you think that is possible? Do you think that can be done?
No, I don't think that can be done. I think that what can be done is that local police forces and the 700,000 local law enforcement personnel around the country can be utilized to help enforce our immigration laws. And I think that the rest of the country should do a lot more what we're doing, which is to target those illegal immigrants who are committing crimes. But no, it's not realistic to just, round up, 11 million people and ship them over the country. It's not.
If you have questions or comments for Corey Stewart, chairman of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors in Virginia, you can call us at 800-433-8850. Send email to kojo@wamu.org. Watch our live video stream at kojoshow.org or shoot us a tweet at kojoshow.
Mr. Chairman, your county is a growing county. It's nearly 450,000 people there. 20% Hispanic, 20% African American, 60-something% white. Median family income $100,000. Growing place. But you've been concerned on the immigration matter that the police department maybe wasn't as aggressive as you wanted them to be to check the IDs or the identification of people who are stopped for crimes. Where are we on that? I think you said there was going to be an audit. Where are we?
Sure. The audit is ongoing. It's being performed by our auditor, which is RSM, formerly called the Glattery. They will have the audit completed by December 15th. I think what we're going to find is that, first, the county's immigration policy, which we put into place in 2008, has been enforced. There's been no issue with regard to that. The question came up, though, about what happens when our police officers incidentally, say they pull somebody over for whatever it is, speeding, etc. And when they put the person's identity into the NCIS database, the police database, and a civil warrant by ICE comes up, the police apparently have not been reporting that warrant hit to ICE. Now, there's not much our police could do about that anyway, since we're not authorized under federal law to actually arrest somebody who is here illegally simply because they're here illegally. We can't do that. So it's just a matter of reporting. I think that's what the audit is going to show.
Why do you think they have not been reporting it to ICE, even though that's what you clearly indicated that you wanted?
I don't know. That's what the audit's going to find out. I don't suspect at this point that there was any deliberate attempt to undermine our policy.
Is it possible they feel they're prohibited from doing that by federal law?
No, that is not the case. Most jurisdictions, when they have an ICE hit on a ICE warrant, when they run somebody's name through a database, they will report that information to ICE. And that if you refuse to report that information to ICE, then you are considered by some to be a so-called sanctuary city or a sanctuary county.
It simply
that's what all the fuss is about.
It simply may be an administrative burden for them, and then also there's some concerns by some people who want to do this program that you send it to ICE, and ICE is a bureaucracy itself, and it's not the most responsive. So it's not a simple one and done kind of action the police officers and the police department can take.
I would agree with that. I think that it's possible that both of those are possibilities, and I think. Look, I mean, ICE is one of the most dysfunctional organizations you're ever going to find, mostly because they've been starved of funds.
I'm waiting for people to start calling for the breakup of the Department of Homeland Security. But can we go back to the Trump thing? One of the conservative measures is with the terrible shooting in San Bernardino, California this week, and other mass shootings, is the issue of guns. It's almost a regular ping pong match when there's been a horrific incident. But there's a gun show this week, I think this weekend at the Prince William County Fairgrounds where I was. And that, where are you on the issue of the guns issue and how that's going to play out in your state, both in local and national politics?
Well, first of all, I don't think that gun control works. I mean, look, there are 300 million guns, or at least in America today. So even if you want to just say, look, no more guns, it wouldn't work. So at that point, and you still have countries like Sweden, France, where there have been mass shootings, and at that point, the population is completely defenseless against these, these vicious people that are, doing the crime. So I do think there's something to be said for the argument that if people are able to carry, and they do have a gun on them, law-abiding citizens, and somebody starts shooting the place up, wouldn't it be a good thing that the population, at least a portion of the population, is armed?
And the Senate just recently voted down a measure that would have had people who are on terrorist watch lists be prohibited from carrying guns. Senator Rand Paul, I think it was, saying that we can't simply let some government bureaucrat tell us who can and who cannot purchase a gun. How do you feel about that?
Well, I share his skepticism of these watch lists. For a while, I was on a no-fly list, not a no-fly list.
What'd you do, Corey?
I think what it was for a couple of years, there was a felon who had the same name as me, and so I couldn't check in as easily as other people, and I'd have to go to the counter in order to receive my boarding pass. And I know that I've heard similar stories from other people. So just because someone's on one of these lists does not necessarily mean that they've done anything wrong, or that they're a criminal, or that they, some of their rights should be denied. So I would share Senator Paul's skepticism of that proposal.
We're talking with Corey Stewart. He's the chairman of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors in the Commonwealth of Virginia, taking your calls at 800-433-8850. We got an email from Gerald who says, please ask Corey Stewart how he justifies voting on rezoning and accepting $1 million in campaign contributions from real estate interests.
Well, the reality is that Prince William County is a very large county, and in order to run, and my position is countywide, I do need to raise campaign funds, and I get a lot of support from the business community. Some of those are real estate developers, but I also get a lot of support from all sorts of other industries, entertainment, recycling. I mean, all kinds of other industries as well. So the one thing that everyone knows about me is that you can help me, you can support me, but at the end of the day, I'm going to make a tough decision. I'm going to make the decision that is right. And under my chairmanship, the number of rezonings has declined substantially by about 80% since I took office in 2006.
Well, and you're in your third. You've got your third term now, right?
Right.
Okay. You dipped your toe into statewide politics once before. Do you anticipate any possibility of running again statewide in the next statewide elections, 2017?
It's something I'm thinking about. I mean, the Republican Party does not have a very deep bench at this point. The Democrats control both the U.S. Senate seats. They control the lieutenant governor, the attorney general. I faced election in Northern Virginia, and I faced what is now 460,000 residents. It's twice the size of a state Senate district. And I've done it in tough years and in good years, and I continue to win. And I think that if Republicans are looking for a winner, somebody who's proven that they can win in Northern Virginia in a very large jurisdiction, I think I'm a candidate that should be looked at. So,
are we talking about a particular office at this point? Ed Gillespie, of course, is hoping to be the Republican candidate for governor. Are you perhaps maybe looking at another office, or do you include that one?
I am looking at governor, yes.
Okay, well, that would be very interesting. You got, first of all, your Republican Party has got to carry Virginia in the presidential campaign.
Right.
And so do you have any suggestions on how your state can do that? That would maybe help your next year.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be spending this next, 9 months or 10 months, whatever it is. Well, I guess it's longer than that, 11 months, working on that, trying to help our presidential candidates. I think the trick to Virginia is to not neglect the outer suburbs of Washington, D.C. And what I mean, Loudoun, Prince William, and Western Fairfax, a good section of Fairfax County. Too often, I think our candidates have focused in the trying to get out the vote in the hardcore Republican areas of Virginia, and have neglected Hampton Roads. They've neglected Northern Virginia, and I think they've done that at their peril.
Having been stuck in traffic, I guess now is a good time to bring up transportation for you. It's a big issue in Prince William County, including the future of I-66. Tolls on that route got the green light just last night by the Northern Virginia Transportation Committee, but there are more steps to be taken in that process. What would you like to see for I-66?
Well, what I would like to see is that the widening of 66, as proposed by the private contractors, should take place in one phase. There shouldn't be two phases. I think there should be widening of 66 both inside of the Beltway and outside the Beltway. There's a proposal to which the governor brought up himself, which is to add 4 HOT lanes and to expand 66 outside of the Beltway past and go all the way past Route 15 to alleviate congestion for everyone. Unfortunately, now what the administration is considering is a 2-phase process. The first of which would be a very damaging one, which would be to toll 66 inside the Beltway, and I just think it's a very bad idea.
Here now is Terry in Gainesville, Virginia. Terry, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was in Prince William County. I live in Gainesville, and back in 2006, 2007, Corey Stewart helped fuel the hysteria over illegal immigration that actually was an unmitigated economic disaster for Prince William County, a disaster which the county has not fully recovered from. we had our home values fall more than any other jurisdiction in the whole Washington area. We had the most foreclosures in all of Virginia. And on top of the foreclosures, we had thousands of Hispanic families get up and move out of the county and walk away from their mortgages. And even the drug company Eli Lilly pulled the plug on their factory that they were building. For years, the rusting girders were standing there in the Innovation Park as a sign of the disaster that happened.
Well, I'm going to ask the chairman to respond to that. I know he's going to say, well, heck, I got reelected. Why do you think that happened? But Corey Stewart, how do you respond to that charge?
Well, it's just not true. The reality is, and now some people are opposed to the illegal immigration effort no matter what. And obviously this gentleman fits into that category. But after our crackdown on illegal immigration, our violent crime rate dropped by upwards of 50%. And yes, home values dropped in 2006 and 2007 and 2008, but they did across the country. And we were a fast-growing jurisdiction. We were hit hard by that. But what happened afterward? Well, what happened afterward was that Prince William County became, and still remains, a very fast-growth jurisdiction. Job growth is among the highest in the country. It's the top. It's been the top in Virginia. So we're flourishing economically. And as Tom mentioned, our median household income is up to $98,000 now, and continues to grow faster than any other jurisdiction in the region.
Tom?
Well, I want to go back to, I think the politics, given the disquiet, I start to say disquiet, but that's too soft of a word. I think the mood of the country is such that we're in for one heck of a ride for a presidential campaign. Virginia is now considered a purple state that can be crucial. I think former Governor Gilmore said the Republicans have to carry Virginia to win the presidency. I'm not sure that's equal to Ohio or not. But I do think the Republican Party has been fighting, a lot of infighting. Tom Davis, a former congressman, calls Northern Virginia virtually New Jersey when he talks about the voters there, and that the Republicans have got to figure out a way to talk to them on a statewide level. You just described your success in your county. But I just wonder, are the Republicans going to be able to gear up supporting someone like Mr. Trump in a national campaign? I'm starting to hear people refer back to 1964 when Barry Goldwater surprised the Republican establishment, became the presidential nominee, and basically lost every state but the Deep South. And that some Democrats are now looking at that thinking, well, maybe this will happen with the Republicans this year. Oh,
you're talking to
this
an
is the
individual
weirdest thing.
who
I'm
is
talking to
standing in
someone on
front
the
of you.
phone who walks in and says hello. Did you
Coach
hear my
Stewart, thank you
question?
very much.
No, actually, I got most of it. I think,
But
I heard the part about Tom Davis.
the Northern Virginia is looking like New Jersey for voting, but and some people are now saying that the Republicans are in danger of having a 1964 style presidential campaign where you nominate someone too far to the right, and the Democrats nationally, even with their long list of woes, will benefit, and then you guys end up losing. And that Virginia is a crucial state in that calculation.
Well, I think that, the biggest mistake that politicians make, which is the mistake which France made after World War I, which is to keep fighting the last war. The fact is that American politics it's very dynamic. It's changing. What is right? What is left? It's a good question to ask, because some policies which were considered part of the left have kind of moved over to to more conservative politicians. I'm speaking about Rand Paul and some of the, looking at, possible legalization of marijuana, things like that. And I'm not supporting that. I'm just saying that, things are in flux. The other thing that I saw with Mr. Trump when he visited Prince William County, I was a little bit surprised, honestly, pleasantly so, at the number of minorities and of young people who were in attendance at his rally.
Yeah, I talked to some of them. It was interesting. African Americans, and I don't think I talked to any Hispanics. But
we're running out of time very quickly here. Corey Stewart, thank you for joining us on the phone and for showing up in the studio. But since you're now here, I guess I should give you the opportunity to talk about the new retreat that there is in the county for wounded veterans.
Well, we've got about 40,000 veterans living in Prince William County. We're very excited about that, and we do have a new retreat center in Western Prince William County that we're very excited about the opening shortly. So one of the big benefits of governing Prince William County is the fact that we've got such a large veteran community. And, one thing I want to mention, it's a little bit off your question, but we now are 55% minority. And when I campaigned for re-election, that was something that I had to take into account. And I have reached out to all the demographic groups. And it's something that, going back, circling back around, that's what Republicans have to do to continue to win, not just in Prince William County and Virginia, but nationally.
Corey Stewart, he is the chairman of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors in the Commonwealth of Virginia, a county that I did not realize is now 55% minority. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter with NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. I didn't repeat that word you said I should not repeat again during the course of this entire broadcast.
Once a week, and that's it. And we've done it this week, so if you don't know what word we're talking about, you have to tune in next week.
I don't plan on using it ever again in the future.
I bet that will not
and
happen.
I'm sure that all of you out there appreciate it, so thank you very much for listening. I'm Kojo Nan.